Alrighty guys, we're going to go ahead and get started with the advanced metric conversion notes. First thing I want to talk about are some possible examples that we'll see with advanced metric conversions. Specifically, that's going to be units with fractions and what those might look like. So in this class, we'll talk about miles per hour, and that's speed or sometimes velocity depending on if we give it a direction. We also have meters per second squared, and that's going to be acceleration that we'll learn about later. And lastly, we have grams per liter. When converting a unit containing fractions, we need to work with the numerator and the denominator in separate steps. So this is something that a lot of people mess up on, so make sure that you're paying close attention. We want to remember to show which units are canceling carefully. And also number 3, units do not need to be next to each other to cancel out. That's important. So for our first example, we're going to try to convert 32 meters per second into miles per hour. So to do that, I've went ahead and I've set up my conversion down below. I have 32 meters over 1 second, because technically 32 is over 1. And if I put the 1 here, it makes it easier to see. I have meters on top, seconds on the bottom. So the first thing that I have to do is write my first ratio. And first, I'm going to go from meters and convert it into feet. I know that 1 meter is equivalent to 3.28 feet. So I'll write that in my conversion. Next, I'm going to go from feet to miles. And I know that 5,280 feet are equivalent to 1 mile. Now that I've taken care of the top part of this, I can see that meters is going to cancel out with meters on the bottom. Feet is going to cancel out with feet on the bottom. And I'm just left with the unit that I need, which is miles. So I'm going to circle that final unit, knowing that I'm all good with the top. Next, I need to take care of the bottom now. I have seconds on the bottom here. In order to cancel out seconds, I need seconds on top here. My conversion that I'm going to use is 60 seconds to 1 minute. Then I see that I have minutes now. I need to convert minutes to hours. So I have 60 minutes to 1 hour. Now I can notice that seconds on the bottom here is going to cancel out with seconds on top here. Minutes on the bottom cancels out with minutes on the top. That means that I'm just left with hours on the bottom. So my final answer is exactly where I need it, and that's miles per hour. I multiply through and I get 71.6 miles per hour. Alright, let's try another practice problem here. So for this one, we want to convert 3.5 kilometers per hour into meters per second. So if we start off the same way we did before, we write our number 3.5 kilometers over 1 hour, because every number can just be written over 1. So in order for us to go from kilometers into meters, we need a conversion. And here we know that 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. That's something that we would have off of our cheat sheet. Next, we need to go from hours to seconds. Well, we know how many minutes are in an hour, so let's do that conversion. We have 60 minutes in an hour. And then we need minutes and seconds. We have 60 seconds in a minute. If we look at the top first, we see that kilometers cancels out with kilometers, and we're just left with meters, which is where we want to be. And then if we look at the bottom, we see that hours on the bottom here is going to cancel out with hours on the top here. Minutes on the bottom here cancels out with minutes on top here. We're just left with 60 seconds on the bottom. We have the units that we need, meters on top, seconds on the bottom. We can just multiply everything through, and we get our final answer of 0.97 meters per second. Let's take a look at another problem. This one wants us to convert 27 miles per hour into meters per second. So let's go ahead and write our 27 miles over 1 hour. The first conversion we're going to use is miles to feet. We have 1 mile is equivalent to 5,280 feet. And then next, we're going to convert feet into meters. We know that 3.28 feet is equivalent to 1 meter. From there, we're going to convert hours into minutes, and then minutes into seconds. So if we look again at this, we can see that miles cancels out with miles, feet with feet. I'm just left with meters. Circle that unit or square it. Then I look at the bottom, Hours cancels out with hours, minutes with minutes. I'm left with seconds, so I have meters over seconds. All I do is multiply through, just like I did before, and I end up with 12.1 meters per second. So now we're going to take a look at some other examples, specifically those with squared or cubed exponents. So for instance, here we have feet squared, and over here we have centimeters cubed. When we're talking about feet squared, we're talking about area. And when we're talking about centimeters cubed, we're talking about volume. So let's try to convert volume from one unit of measurement to another. So when converting a unit containing fractions, it's important to make sure that we are squaring or cubing our conversion factors. Now let's take a look at below what we mean. So letter A wants us to convert 1500 meters cubed into kilometers cubed. So I'm going to go ahead, write my fraction. I have 1500 meters cubed times my ratio. So if I have meters cubed on top here, that means I need meters cubed on the bottom over here, which means I need kilometers cubed on top. I can see that I have kilometers cubed on top and meters cubed on the bottom. Next, I need my numbers, and I know that 1 kilometer is equivalent to 1,000 meters. But since this problem's cubed, it's not just 1 kilometer anymore, it's 1 cubed kilometer and 1,000 cubed meters. Go ahead and multiply my way through. I end up with 1.5 times 10 to the negative 6 kilometers cubed. Now let's try converting 500 milliliters to millimeters. This one's a little tricky because milliliters is already a volume and millimeters is also a volume. And there's an equivalency that we can use for that. That equivalency is 1 milliliter is equivalent to 1 cubic centimeter. So if we take a look at our fraction, we have 500 milliliters times our first ratio. Well, first we're going to go from milliliters into cubic centimeters. So I put milliliters on the bottom, cubic centimeters on top. I have 1 milliliter is equivalent to 1 cubic centimeter. Next, I'm going to multiply that, and I'm going to multiply it by my ratio. So let's remember what our end goal is here. We want to end in millimeters cubed. So now I need a ratio that has centimeters cubed to millimeters cubed. Since centimeters cubed are on top here, I need to put them on the bottom over here. That's going to give me centimeters cubed on bottom and millimeters cubed on top. I know that 1 centimeter is equivalent to 10 millimeters, but I have cubic millimeters and cubic centimeters. Therefore, I need to have 1 cubic centimeter is equivalent to 10 cubic millimeters. So now, when I multiply my way through, I end up with 500,000 millimeters cubed. I can see that millimeters on top cancels out with millimeters on the bottom. Centimeters cubed cancels out with centimeters cubed. I'm just left with millimeters cubed. Again, it's important to remember that it's no longer 10 to 1, it's 10 cubed over 1 cubed. And the reason it's cubed is because we are dealing with cubed units here. So the only way to get rid of these cubic centimeters is to have a ratio that has cubic centimeters to cubic millimeters. Now we're going to take a look at our last few examples. The first one wants us to convert 450 kilometers squared to meters squared. So let's start off with 450 kilometers squared, and we're going to multiply that by a ratio. Well, we know that 1 kilometer is equivalent to 1,000 meters. But again, we're dealing with kilometers squared. So therefore, we need 1 squared kilometer squared is equivalent to 1,000 squared meters squared. If we have squared or cubed units, we need to square or cube our ratio. So now we can see that kilometers squared are going to cancel out, and we're just left with meters squared. Multiply everything through, we get 4.5 times 10 to the 8th meters squared. Make sure we're including our units. Next, we want to convert 1.5 meters cubed into feet cubed. So let's start with 1.5 meters cubed times, well, we need a ratio of meters to feet. We know that 1 meter is equivalent to 3.28 feet, but we're dealing with meters cubed. So 1 cubic meter is equivalent to 3.28 cubic feet. So again, it's important to realize that since we have meters cubed here, we need meters cubed here, which if we're cubing these meters, we're going to cube the ratio. So now when we multiply through, we're just left with 52.9 cubic feet. Last one, convert 5.0 meters cubed to milliliters. Start with 5.0 meters cubed. Then I can go from meters cubed into centimeters cubed. I know that 1 meter is equivalent to 100 centimeters, but again, I'm talking about meters cubed, so I need to have 1 cubic meter is equivalent to 100 cubic centimeters. Now, meters cubed cancel out. I just have centimeters cubed. From there, I use my ratio of 1 cubic centimeter is equivalent to 1 milliliter. I notice in this ratio that the 1 is not cubed and the 1 milliliter is not cubed. That's because this ratio has that already factored into it. Therefore, cubic centimeters cancel out with cubic centimeters. I multiply everything through, and I'm just left with 5.0 times 10 to the 6 milliliters. Some key takeaways that we need to remember is that when we're dealing with squared or cubed units, we need to square or cube our normal ratios. But if our ratio is already cubed, for instance, this specific ratio here, 1 milliliter to 1 cubic centimeter, we do not need to cube that. Another thing that we need to remember is that when dealing with fractions, we want to work with the top first, and then we can swap out the bottom units at the end.